There's just been a huge explosion in how social and mobile have been influencing not only how we design and deliver learning and talent programs, but also how we measure those programs and what tools we use. So today is a little panel about that topic. And I have three panelists here, and I'll give them a moment to introduce themselves to you. But we have a couple of questions to get the ball rolling that I'll provide to the panelists. And then we really want to open it up to you in the audience to ask the panel questions around social mobile so that we have a really good dialogue around this emerging topic that seems to be just really picking up with a head of steam. So as we start out, I'll just go ahead and ask maybe Dave here to get started with a little bit about yourself and your role, and then we'll go down the row and then we'll get going. Make sense? All right, Dave.
Good. So my name is Dave Rubenstein. I'm a senior director at Coldwell Banker Real Estate. So functionally, what my role is essentially on the operational side of Coldwell Banker University. So metrics and measurement, of course, rolls into me. Instructor delivery, platforms and technology that we use to deliver content rolls in under me. So that's a little bit about me and my background, but Coldwell Banker University is our entity. One thing I'll mention that's very different from most of your organizations is that we are primarily a franchise network. And so some of what I might say today may come off in a different perspective that way because the folks that we train, that we support, are not our employees. They are the employees really of our independently owned and operated franchisees.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Claudia?
Yeah, and you should probably see that he has some metrics that matter dashboard here that
right here.
he carries around everywhere he goes. So good afternoon. My name is Claudia Rodriguez. I am the Chief Learning Officer for Motorola Solutions, and clearly we're seeing that there is a huge inflection point that we're currently going through, both with respect to mobile as well as social. And as a matter of fact, I would say the convergence of these two, because in reality, if you think about it, you're accessing your social networks for collaboration also from your mobile devices. So it's not one or the other, it's a convergence of the two, and it's a matter of adopting it and making sure that we embrace it. So as such, we see it as a key component to the success of the operation, and how we measure that and how we leverage that to measure the success of learning and talent development across the company are equally important.
Great.
So thank you for your time in advance.
Thank you, Claudia. Jeb?
Yeah, Jeb Metric. I'm the SVP of Product at KnowledgeAdvisors. So my team and I are responsible for all aspects of the Metrics That Matter product, from product roadmap to design, development, support, etc., including the MTM dashboard that Dave has so kindly brought with him today. And certainly, one of our focal points is aligning metrics that matter to what Claudia was mentioning, just this push towards a mobile and a social work and learning environment. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jeb. Thank you, all panelists. So the first question that I'll ask, just to kind of get the ball rolling here, and maybe I'll have that go to Dave first, if you don't mind, is in terms of tools that Coldwell Banker uses to design, and then ultimately what do you use as your delivery for learning and development and talent development that's sort of a social mobile feel to it. So it could be a virtual knowledge network, an app of some sort, it could be a community of practice, some performance support. What's Coldwell Banker up to in doing in that realm?
Yeah, so we did make a significant investment about 2 years ago in the world of social learning portals. So apologies to the LMS vendors that may be here, but we weren't really digging our LMS. And so we decided to take matters in our own hands and build 2 social learning portals that sat really on the front end of the LMS. And the idea there was to give a collaborative environment where sales associates and managers can come in and pick and choose what pieces of content they wanted to consume, if you will, and also have collaborative discussions around them. So we did invest heavily in 2 social learning portals. Our portal for salespeople has been very successful. Lots of traction. Metrics That Matter is telling us we're seeing quite a bit of improvement in their performance. In our case, it's usually around sales performance with their ability to consume as they desire. So lots of traction there. Most recently, in fact, this quarter, we are releasing a pilot, we're calling it My CBU, where folks on their mobile device can not only talk with each other around course materials, but more importantly, access resources from their mobile device. We're even using, just to give an example, the geosynchronous services on your iPhone or Android so that we can identify salespeople who are in a similar market in real estate, and they can get together over coffee. So some ideas there I'll talk more about lately.
That'd be great. Thank you, Dave. Claudia?
Yeah, so similarly for us, as I talked about, social collaboration is just paramount. So we've also, as a company, recently have gone through a major investment as well to enable a collaboration platform across the entire corporation. And throughout the entire regions, all the functions, everybody is essentially either on the platform or moving to the platform. And it's become a really great tool for us to have access to just-in-time insights, have the opportunity for people to ask questions, have experts from anywhere in the world really, just provide guidance depending on those questions, the insights, sharing wins. It's something from a sales perspective. I mean, you're always trying to find a way to do that, right? Competitive intelligence and doing that in a way that it doesn't leave the premises of the company, right? So doing that within the boundaries of the company. So we're using it very much in that capacity, and so far the feedback has been outstanding. But I also talked about mobile earlier, and mobile from a learning perspective has become very, very important. So if you think about, again, talking about the inflection point, if you think about data that, studies, whether from IDP or others, that say that essentially by 2015, the majority of the US internet users are going to be mobile users. They're not going to be accessing the internet from a PC, but from a tablet or a smartphone. I mean, that forces us to think about how we do things differently, for sure. So again, mobile learning for us is very important. So to that point, my team does the development and launch of any mobile learning program, courseware, job aid, but also documentation, so all the user guides, all the service manuals, anything like that for the company. And on both ends, we have introduced mobility, right? So we have introduced mobile documentation as well as mobile learning. So on the mobile documentation side, we actually developed a mobile reader ourselves. Chris, from my team can probably give you some insights on that, or from the rest of the team here. I don't have all the technical details as to why we had to develop it. All I know is that we were not able to find something off the shelf that would take our documentation and just have it put in the device in a way that we could query it, search it, tag it, and do things like that. So along with building the documentation to be mobile enabled, we also developed our own mobile reader, and now you can download both. And then on the mobile courseware side, all of our courses, especially on the sales and quick technical reference guide type, are going as mobile enabled, right? So on the learning management system, you see an option. There's an icon that illustrates that the course or the program is mobile enabled, and you can just download that to your device or access it from the field. So those are some of the things, Jeff, that we've done because obviously, like I said, I mean, it's the reality, and we just have to embrace it.
Absolutely. Great points. Thank you, Claudia. Jeb?
Yeah, so within KnowledgeAdvisors, I'd say we were heavy users of the Salesforce Chatter application, which is really interesting, just the way these groups sort of emerge, and they're both sort of vertical within the departments, but then also a way to sort of bridge departments and have those conversations occur across the organization. Also on my team, extensive use of wikis for documentation from the software development group and such, and just that ability for everybody to sort of view and contribute really serves to actually improve our documentation at the end of the day, but also really ensure that there's really high quality and really high participation. So it's a real great sort of engagement activity as well. On the flip side, on the metrics that matter side, we just recently in November released what we're calling MTM Mobile, which is really our first sort of application or first piece of software that really is meant to touch the employees themselves, not just for L&D professionals, but really reaching out to those people that we all serve, the person that's going through the learning. And it's an app that really allows your learners to navigate courses in the future and see the MTM scores. We've put them into a star ratings, similar to what you'd find in Yelp or Amazon or things like that. So they can really make more informed learning decisions, so that they can actually even see particular feedback on the courses. So the verbatim feedback that other employees, their peers, have given to those learning events. What's also we've added in there is you're not actually seeing any names attached to that feedback, but you do see demographics. So if you're a software engineer, you can see what other software engineers thought of a given class. And so really excited about that, really helping to complete that feedback loop and hoping to really provide more value to those people who've been giving us all that data over the years.
Excellent point. So just to kind of summarize what the panel is saying is there's, it seems like all the panelists up here have done a lot of work in terms of what they're doing with social mobile. You're seeing a lot of real-time collaboration and networking, like Dave had mentioned with the sales team. You know, Claudia, you talked extensively about really making things mobile friendly for your workforce through some of the tools that you've been putting out and just making it easier for people who have mobile devices to access learning and content and information. And then Jeb, you talked about really using mobility in a social way, such as the mobile app, because you're able to share data and help people make data-driven decisions based upon a mobile app, but doing so in a way that's a little bit more social because they can get to see information in a collective way and in a collaborative way that's been gathered. So really great things going on from that regard. The next question I'd like to ask our panel, and maybe this question I'll have Claudia take the first shot at it, and then we'll go Jeb and Dave, is in terms of measurement. So, you know, having a social and mobile view of things from a delivery perspective is great, but now let's talk a little bit about measurement. So if you wouldn't mind, maybe share a little bit of your feedback and ideas and thoughts around measuring what you're doing from a social mobile perspective. So if you have those mobile-ready resources, what are some of the metrics that you might use to ensure that they're optimal and things are functioning as designed?
Yeah, so this is probably a little more complex, but certainly, you know, we're as it relates to the social collaboration platform that I spoke about earlier, we're looking at some of the metrics that are common with respect to social, you know, behaviors, right? So we're looking at the number of people that are in certain groups. How does that compare to the targeted number of people, the mix of people, not only the numbers, but the mix of people? Is it the right targets that we have, again, within those groups? The quality of the conversations that they're having. We do have group owners, and we have people that are evaluating how each one of the group is performing. So is the quality of the dialogue robust enough? Is it what we expect, or is it more casual in nature? Something maybe, I mean, to be frank, should be happening outside of the office, right? So, there's some monitoring for sure that is happening. We're also surveying and asking direct questions in terms of estimation of impact, right? So this is the trickiest part, probably, right? So, you know, it's good to know how many people are accessing it. It's good to see the number of likes. It's good to see the questions that are posed, the number of answers, all that participation. That part is good. But ultimately, what we want to see is the impact back to the business, right? Whether financial or otherwise, productivity could be one of them. That's, I have to say, by far the trickiest part of what we're doing. And right now, the way we're doing it is just through estimation. We're asking questions, and we're starting to collect data as far as what the various leaders of the different groups are estimating the impact to be. From a mobile learning perspective, I think that's probably easier in some respects because it's just following what we're doing with a course, whether it's being accessed from a fixed station or a PC, or it's being accessed from a mobile device, through the learning management system, through metrics that matter, the capability that we have. we're just able to track it. We haven't seen a major difference in how we operate as it relates to that. So the biggest area of complexity for us, and where we're spending the most time now thinking how we go about it, is on the social side by doing the things that I mentioned.
That's great. So in summary, what you're saying is you obviously gather a lot of metrics from an efficiency perspective on your social programs by looking at activity metrics, demographics of use, the quality of the conversation. A lot of monitoring takes place to do that. And then in addition, from an effectiveness perspective, trying to get some roughly reasonable estimates of impact through some surveys on those networks. And then from a device perspective, being able to track if this person accessed this content, they accessed it through a PC or a tablet or a mobile phone, so you'll know what's trending and more popular or more in demand. So that's some great indicators. Thanks, Claudia. Jeb, what's your feedback on this question?
Yeah, so certainly for tools like MTM Mobile or our MTM Help performance support site, we track efficiency metrics, so number of users, get some really rich analytics about the type of devices that they're using when they hit us, where they are when they're doing it, time of day, trending, all of those types of things that are necessary and valuable to really watch at, even the flows through those applications. But we also actually have embedded within MTM Help our informal learning module. So if any of you are MTM users and you utilize the help system, as you're looking at a piece of content, you should see a small question off to the side, which is what we refer to as a micropoll. And that poll is attempting, those questions that appear in that poll really are attempting to get at some of that effectiveness information that we'd like to understand around that. Similarly, we have some videos that we host in the help site. There we actually use the pop-up survey capability. So given that the learner or the individual who's using it is investing a little bit more time in that activity, we feel it's more appropriate to ask a little bit more of their time back. So it's that balance between what they're getting out of the system, how much they're investing to get that bit of learning or that chunk of knowledge, and then how much you really want to take of their time to get some feedback around it. But those are sort of the main areas.
That's great, Jeb. So it's very complementary to what Claudia was just talking about, in that you measure activity data on the various tools that we put out and deliver on, and those could include things like number of users, the date and time stamp that they submitted those, and you can do various analyses there. And then from the effectiveness perspective around how well we're doing with those tools and what value people are getting out of those, having a very simple, easy micropoll or pop-up that's embedded in some of these forms of informal learning can help to gather that in a real-time point of use perspective. So as a person's in those particular tools at that point in time, gathering something real quick, effectiveness, how well people think we're doing with these platforms is good. So thank you, Jeb. That's very helpful. Dave, do you want to close out this question?
Yeah, so for our social learning portals, if you will, we've taken the approach that we're going to treat it like a library. So within our portals, we don't necessarily ask for each piece of content to be rated. What we do is we ask users, because they're going in and out several times a month, maybe 20 to 30 to 40 times a year. So we're asking them at intervals the value that they perceive from their experience visiting the library, if you will. How much has it added to their ability to sell, and to what degree? So we do a little bit of isolation on around of our social learning portals. So we try to get a better sense of how much is it impacting their sales improvement, so we can get a better handle on our return on investment. So that's sort of the big picture, how we approach measuring our social learning portals, is that of a library. I'm not going to measure, if you like, that sentence in that book, but I do want to know how much value the portals added to their ability to sell and more effectively. Now, what we do also is we look at business results and correlate them to those who visited our social learning portal. So it's a correlation, not a causation, but we look at, of course, the effectiveness, which I just mentioned, efficiency, the number of folks, and the business outcome, which is really a correlation to those folks visiting versus what they're seeing, or not the seeing, but what the results show us in terms of their sales numbers. Now, switching gears to mobile, since we are piloting this quarter, it's a very timely discussion. So our approach for our new mobile CBU app is a very controlled pilot. So we do have a naturally occurring control group. We're actually piloting it with our rookie sales training program, and we run that program about 5 times a month. So out of the 5 classes that we run every month, 3 of the 5 will have access to the My CBU mobile app, and we're rolling that out now. So based on early data, we're seeing that the experience that our students are getting in terms of their ability to improve their sales is superior in the training program where they have access to the My CBU app as part of the program versus those who don't. So I'm very excited to have a naturally occurring control group because we don't want to hold back anything, but for the sake of the pilot, the numbers looking favorable at this time. So that's kind of our approach for both social learning versus mobile, and they don't always overlap in our world. Sometimes the social might not be mobile ready, most cases it is, and vice versa. Something on a mobile scale isn't always have a social component, but most of the time it does.
Great. So in summary then, what Dave was discussing was really the library approach to things. So it's not necessarily Coldwell Banker's philosophy that you necessarily have to survey people every time they go into the library. You do some periodic evaluation to check the pulse of what people are doing and what the experience is like and the value and the impact. But yet you've also done some correlative analysis of the visitors to these resources against their performance. So it's not necessarily causal, but it's correlative enough to give you a roughly reasonable estimate that these things are making a difference on the outcomes and the results. And then from a mobile perspective, taking advantage of measurement capabilities like naturally occurring control groups, especially early on in the launch of these products, is a best practice. And you're certainly illustrating that by measuring the control group, both the people that have the access to the tools and those that don't, and seeing whether or not there's a market difference. And the good news is that you have. So that's really great. So thank you. So one of the final questions I'll kind of place to the panel, and then I really want to open it up for a robust dialogue with all of you and your questions. So be thinking about what you would want to ask our panelists up here who have a lot of experience in this area, is this. So when you think about, in general, social mobile, and you've touched upon these things already, but we'll see here on this one. And Jeb, I'll start with you. So specific tools themselves that are social and mobile in nature that are used from a learning measurement perspective. So for example, making sure that if you're going to launch an evaluation, it's mobile optimized. That would be an example. Or maybe you have, it's a text-based way to fill out an evaluation, or the ways that you go about gathering measurement in your measurement process. How have you revised what you do and adapted your processes around the act of measurement to really help to create a more positive social and mobile experience for the people that are responding to those charges, and to say, hey, I want to measure more, I want to fill this out, and they're charged to give you this data. How are you adapting that so that if you're doing it in a social mobile way, it's a better experience for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely it's a part of everything we do on our product roadmap now, and so we've invested quite a bit over the last few years, Jeffrey. Sort of strange, but just in ensuring that for these employees, for the people that are touching metrics that matter and providing feedback, they do have options for their experience, and they are able to respond to evaluations in their device of choice. And increasingly, we've seen the mobile devices really take up more and more of the evaluations submitted into metrics that matter. So certainly, hopefully, all of you have been filling out your conference evaluations over the last couple of days. If you haven't, shame on you. Who are you? Why would you not be giving us feedback?
We can track that, Jeb, behind the scenes.
Yeah, right. Actually, you're right. I can follow up with you later.
We know who you are.
But hopefully you've seen that experience, and you can even look at it against your experience on the laptop. It's a very different visual. It's really optimized for a tight display, very lightweight, so the speed is good, those types of things. We've added in QR codes so that every class that's scheduled in MTM has a QR code. So we do have some clients that they'll have a big QR code on their PowerPoint at the end of class. They might not be doing technology training or something where somebody would be bringing in an actual laptop or something like that. So the students in that class are able to just bring out smartphones and complete the evaluation in that mode. We have a new application called Performance Improvement, which is really about the conversation between managers and employees, either pre-training or post-training, to ensure there's really good alignment. That entire application, which does goal planning and sort of updates and things like that, was written using responsive design, which means that whether you're using a laptop, it looks one way, and then as soon as you go to a smartphone device or an iPad or something like that, the screen adjusts to fit the form factor. And so the experience is very, very common across all the different sort of devices, but at the same time fits the form factor that the user is using at that point in time. So really it's just sort of infused everything we do and become a consideration in everything we do going forward.
That's great. Thank you, Jeb. So very much, as you can tell, it's part of, your design process as you're designing, programs and you're thinking about measuring. Mobile, social are now a part of that embedded design. And Claudia, what's your feedback on this?
Actually, very, very similar. So, one of the I guess you can call it directives to the organization was recently to say that on an ongoing basis, we're just going to rely on electronic evaluations. I know, it seems sort of trivial and maybe, something that should have happened a long time ago, but there's a number of challenges, to get to the point where you can actually do that, especially when you're dealing with, such a spread coverage like we have throughout the world, right? So, we deliver learning programs all throughout, right? Some of them, in Chicago, some of them in the Middle East, some of them in China, some of them in India, and some of them in very high-techy type environments, and some of them not so much, right? To be frank, some of the training that we deliver to some of our customers, they don't even have, in some cases, access to the internet themselves, right? Not even at home, right? So that's the reality. So that's forced us to, take a little bit more of a longer approach than we would have wanted to get this rolled out, to move to all electronic. But certainly in the more developed geographies, we adopted it there first. And we're now going through the process where we do have an instructor that goes, right, to every one of these locations, as remote as they are, and they do take a laptop with them, right? So, placing the right evaluation capability within the laptop, that's what we're leaning toward doing now. We're also relying on the social aspect that some of the systems bring to us, as far as being able to rate the content, whether the learning management system with the rating, the star rating as an option, the content management system, you can also rate the content there, and you can add your comments and things like that, right? So we're looking at different tools that also leverage the social aspect, not only the mobile aspect, but also the social component, to rate the effectiveness and the impact of what we're doing. And we're trying to incorporate both.
Excellent.
I would say we're still trying to crack the code here on how to best measure social learning in our environment. So we've been experimenting a lot with ways to get a steady stream of data points. I know some of my colleagues at KA probably know I call once a month to try to crack this code. But what we started with was simply asking the user to engage in the social learning environment with a survey. We were very concerned about aesthetics at that point, because our portals are, there's not a lot of screen real estate to spare, and so we kind of pulled back. We also found, and I'll guide you to be careful there, because if you don't want to ruin the experience in a social learning environment, you really want that to be paramount over the survey, or the survey question even. So be very careful with where and when you attempt to get data points. So what we wound up with to date is a twofold approach for our social learning measurement in terms of getting data points. And one is still, we get, I wouldn't say a flow, we get a trickle of data points each month from the social learning portals. We'll all engage in our somewhat robust survey, but not too robust. We also resorted to a monthly random sample of folks who visited the portals. And so that goes out via email, very traditional, to their mailbox, asking for feedback, where they'll then get a more robust survey about how much value add, how much sales improvement can they attribute to their visiting the social portal over that length of time. So we've kind of went at a two-approach method for social learning. The other little pieces of advice that I've learned by mistake was we're doing a lot in terms of performance support, getting resources in that moment of need in context with regard to mobile now. So I'm sort of switching gears now to mobile. And be very, very careful about when you measure there. If you're in their workflow, especially in a sales environment, you're in their moment of need where they need to get that resource, they're in front of a customer, let's say, you want to really steer clear of putting a measurement piece if it's right in their workflow, especially when, in my case, it's a sales environment, and you're getting in the way of essentially getting that piece of content that's going to help them either make the sale or potentially not. So be very, very careful there with regard to mobile.
Great, thank you. So what we've heard from the panelists on this particular topic is there's a lot of effort being put into making things just easier for today's mobile and social learner. So you've got things like doing the evaluation in a way that you've thought through it being friendly for a mobile device versus just a PC, so that the experience for a person on a smartphone is just made all that easier. You don't want them to see a negative experience when they pop up the link on their phone and they click out of it. So that was one thing. QR codes, Jeb talked about. If the classroom is just easier to zap a QR code with your mobile phone and get to the evaluation, let's make that easy for them to do. So ease of use. We also heard about making sure that you can move and strive towards electronic evaluation worldwide, even despite the barriers and challenges. And I know, Claudia, many of the audience out there has similar challenges, so I'm glad that you brought that up. We also talked about, content ratings is a great way to engage people in a social way. You can do content ratings on your mobile phone as well. It's just a way to get people engaged socially with the content by rating it and letting others see those ratings. Very similar like when you buy something on Amazon.com. It's a way that we're all used to, so why not apply that here? And then Dave closed with some very good points as well, which I thought were valid, and they were things about telling us to be careful about the aesthetics. You want to make sure that the experience, again, is the most important thing. Where and when you do measurement is something that's not trivial. It should be taken very seriously. You should think through it, and that you want to make sure that it doesn't disrupt the process. So I think that these are all very good points to us all and good best practices. So thank you all for that. What I'd like to do now is really open the panel up to all of you so that you could ask your questions, make comments. This is an opportunity to really engage in a dialogue on a very important topic. And we'd love to do that now. And I would argue that if you have a question and the panelists answer that question, and they will, but if there's somebody else in the audience that's like, I've got something else to add to that, let's do it. I mean, this is a collective knowledge of a lot of people here, and we should harness that for this panel. So I'd like to open it up and see where we have the questions, and we'll go from there. So where are the questions? We have a question up here, so we'll try to get the microphone over to you, and you'll then ask your question. Great.
My question is to both Dave and Claudia. When you started on this move to mobile, did you pick certain programs, or did you make sure that all the courses are available in mobile? Then the second question, follow-up question is, what is the insights that you have got since you rolled it out? Do you see more people completing the course compared to before you went on this mobile platform? Or and also, do you see knowledge gain compared to what they were doing? Because now they are learning at the time of need, right? So do you see the knowledge gain and the application on the job increasing in your MTM survey? Are you seeing that?
So if I may go first. So on the first question, it was very selective at first, right? And that would be my recommendation, right? In some ways, we wanted to be careful about what programs we were going to play with, right? And we did run a pilot. we ran a pilot both on the learning side. By learning, I mean more of the traditional courseware side, and then a pilot on the documentation side. And there were a lot of things that came up during those pilots that, quite honestly, I'm so glad that we went through the trial phase. Excuse me, because having rolled that out massively would have been potentially a disaster. So, it allowed us to have a safe environment to play with. And, quickly we realized that, we were in good shape and we could, by tweaking a couple of things, just roll it out more pervasively. And even so, we're not doing that across the board. So there are some courses that are, very much instructor-led, where we sell, solutions that are, technical solutions that are very complex in nature, right? And it takes days to go through it. So obviously, those are not going to be candidates, to take something and put it, into a mobile device. But certainly, when we're thinking about, you have an account manager, talking about sales, Dave, right? So you have an account manager that is on his or her way to visit, a customer, right? And you just want to make sure that they have just-in-time access to the information, right? That's a prime candidate, right, to do something like that. Or on the other hand, you have a field technician or a pre-sales or post-sales, engineer in the field, troubleshooting something, right? Most likely on the post-sales side, troubleshooting something, and they just need quick access to something. Boom, right? Perfect fit for that. So whereas we were very selective in the beginning with the pilots, we became a little less selective with the programs, that we rolled out after that pilot. We still have some boundaries around and some criteria that allow us to make the selection as to which ones we make enabled and which ones we don't. The second part to your question, as far as the effectiveness and the difference in impact, I would say probably too early to tell, although I can tell you that we do look at our data, obviously full disclosure, MTM data. And we have seen, an improvement, steadily quarter on quarter, right? And, whether we can correlate directly to that or not, that's something that we have to see, but it does coincide with the timing, right? So talking about correlation, you were mentioning that earlier, right? So there's an indicator that there's something there, but I'll be cautious and say that it might be too early to tell.
Yeah, so I would echo a lot what Claudia said. I'll give probably a little more specifics in our world. So our mobile initiatives and our social initiatives aren't tied to any particular program. They're additive. So we're not tying them there. We want them to have value regardless if they're in a certain program or not. But the data so far, although inconclusive, and I was talking with Jeb a little bit about this at lunch, but here's what I can tell you, is when we look at the job impact data for those that have access to mobile and social learning versus those that have access to the entire university except those two, we're seeing that the job impact is higher with those who have access to the suite, social, mobile, and traditional programs. In our case, we're at maybe a 3 percentage point differential. Again, it's too early to tell, but that's what we're seeing early, is about a 3% improvement in job impact for participants, if you will, salespeople who have access to the full arsenal versus not the full arsenal, not including social and mobile. So early indications are good, but I think time will tell.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Great question. All right, we have another question. It's kind of blinding up here, so I'm just going to point out, I think right there, looks like a hand is up. Yep. Okay.
I think we can all agree that social learning and wikis are a great way to collect and share information in an enterprise, share best practices. But I'm thinking that at some point there might be some worst practices that might sneak in there. And Claudia mentioned that some of the information has been moderated for quality control. Are there any other best practices or ideas on how to validate the data that is actually collected in these wikis and that permeate throughout social learning?
So if you'd like to go ahead.
Oh, sure.
So you go ahead.
I was just going to mention in terms of, we're pretty deep into user-generated content. Now, in my world, it's video content, so we have our salespeople will upload best practice videos to share, as opposed to more traditional wikis. So we do moderate, but our parameters are if it's not unethical or illegal, we're going to let them upload and we're going to let it go within our social learning portal. Now, our view also is natural selection will win there. So for those that get their video content up to their social learning portals, those that are rated highest will get the most views and so forth. But if it's a clearly contrary to our ethics or business practices, we will pull it down. And we make that disclosure right when they were to upload any user-generated content, so they're aware of those parameters.
You basically said what I was going to say, so that's perfect. It's in line with the code of ethics, as you were talking about, right? So, as a matter of fact, we implemented a new policy within the company, and every employee, before they have access for the first time to the collaboration tool, they have to read through it, they have to become familiar with it, and they have to sign off. The same way you would sign off, in your contract, right? That you're not going to do unethical things, right? That you're not going to disclose, intellectual property or, confidential information outside of the company, right? So it's the same thing, it's just a different media that is used for this. But we did implement and rolled out a new policy, and we're very strict on making sure that people go through that before they even see this world that is behind it.
For us, in terms of quality, it was really for us with the wikis was quality and activity issue, and really finding those champions and really encouraging them, I think was critical, because it's sort of a chicken and the egg. There's got to be high quality stuff there to get people to go, but and then the other one was just the leaders, just leadership support of that activity and encouragement was really critical to just sort of get the momentum going and sort of break through that critical mass where it became self-sustaining after that point.
So I think overall, in short, the answer to your question would be if your employees get a sense before they're about to hit that post button or pull a video up or whatever, that what they're about to post is borderline inappropriate, probably not a best practice to do it, would be my advice. So it's kind of what we're saying up here. All right.
And similarly, if I may say one other thing, Jeff. So similarly, we have, and you probably have this as well at the bank, but we have individuals throughout the company that act as advisors, right? So, if there's a question and people are uncertain about, what to post or what not, there are people that have been identified as, people that you go to and you say, hey, I'm on the fence. I'm not sure. Is this borderline questionable, right? And, yes, no, right? So we also had to implement that as part of the support models, so to speak.
That's great. All right. Yep.
Hi. How do you align your roadmap, your use of the technology with the roadmap of your IT organization? And how do you collaborate? And probably part of that is then how do you assess the need and the readiness then that you're ready to use mobile and social learning?
Right. So you don't want to be too far out there with the technology, right? You want to have it close to the point of need when people will use it. That's a great question. Anybody take a shot at that?
Yeah, I'll take a shot. It's going to be probably a different answer than most, but in my world, we don't have we're a big company, but we don't have a big IT group, and so the word pilot is very powerful, and so I pilot everything, and that means I don't need IT's approval, and if it's successful, then we have the data to say, let's make the investment. But most of what we're doing here, the mobile, the social, believe it or not, we needed a little bit of IT help with single sign-on kind of stuff, but other than that, we really didn't need a lot. I mean, we need to outsource the build and so forth, some of the parameters, but we didn't need a lot of internal IT help.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, I think it depends on the project, right? So as you just mentioned, right, some of them will be less intensive from an IT perspective than others. Obviously, the ones that are more intensive, we just have to absolutely get on the same page in terms of the roadmap. Make sure there's a corporate sponsorship behind it, right? But then there are others, as similarly that we just do on our own, right? The social collaboration one was not one of them. That was a company-led initiative. That was something where we needed to touch everybody, and we felt it was appropriate to have all the banking and the marketing organization helped with a lot of that. But there are others where we're also fans of pilots too.
yeah, and just to add on too, in our social learning portals, we couldn't get the IT supported and on the roadmap. So we went out and built out a separate entity that sat outside of our LMS, sat outside of our intranet, although it's single sign-on everywhere. So to your point, in our case, we went down the road of let's build it on our own with some help with some partners and put it out there between our intranet and the LMS. So it was an easier battle to win.
So I think what we're hearing here is, number one, both from the first question that was asked, not only can pilots be a great tool that the panel is recommending from dipping your toe in the pool of social mobile, it's also a great tool from a change management perspective, but it's also a great tool to get IT support and buy-in after the fact, right? So instead of going and saying, here's this 50-page strategy on what we want to do, what we're hearing from the leaders up here is sometimes you've got to take a little bit of initiative and say, I'm going to do a pilot on my own, almost to the extent, and I don't want to put words in your all's mouth, but it's like ask for forgiveness, not for permission. And if it works out really well, hey, you got something there. And if it doesn't, you can just say, I'm sorry.
Jeffrey, you said that, right?
I did say that. You can quote me.
That.
These guys did not say that. That was from me. All right. What's the next question? Yes, back there.
So my question's around a traditional kind of orientation or onboarding program that's delivered through mobile. When you're evaluating that, is it any different than what the traditional onboarding or training program was? Are you evaluating anything different? Are you looking for differences in the two programs if you're piloting it? And then how do you draw that out?
For us, we're not looking to deliver programs here to the iPhone or to the Android. We are looking to deliver our traditional programs to the iPad. So I want to draw that distinction between mobile, that iPads, yes, we will deliver, whether you're on an iPad, a PC, yes, take our rookie training program, whatever device you prefer. But when it comes to this device, no, we're not bringing courses to your mobile device at all. And so that's sort of our tactic or our trajectory that way.
For the most part, that's similar to us as well. The majority of the mobile-enabled programs would follow that. There are some exceptions, but it's more, if you think about like job aids, type, formats. Those, we're making available on the smartphone as well. But the majority is, for a tablet. From an onboarding perspective, though, one of the things that, I think you had a component of your question that had to do with onboarding, correct? Yeah, so one of the challenges, right, that we're going through, and this has to do with IT, the inner dependencies that we have, is that we built in this, onboarding new hire learning program, right? In addition to the boot camps or the sessions that I know you mentioned as well that you have, monthly. But we have, it's an interactive, toolkit, so to speak, right? That you just have a new hire go through and they click and, it tells you what you need to know within the first 30 days, what you need to know and know how to do within the next, or first 60 days, 90 days, and all that stuff. The challenge is that the links, right, for some of the things that you need to go through are very much IT dependent, right? And some of the systems that you're trying to access are not necessarily mobile enabled yet, right? So we may have the interface, we may have the nice, cool thing, right, that the people really like, but they cannot really always have full access to the system, once they click on it. So those are some of the things that we're working through right now. But certainly that's the idea. I mean, that, if we're saying, you need to be anywhere, to do your job as a salesperson, as an example, right? It shouldn't be limited to be behind a computer somewhere static, right? So we're trying to figure out how to do that, but we have some dependencies there.
From a measurement perspective, too, when you're transitioning from more of a formal face-to-face to a mixed model or more of a mobile model or a remote model, clients that I've worked with, you start bringing in other metrics because cost is always a really big factor in those sort of initiatives. And so factoring in the savings on travel, the savings on the face-to-face delivery costs is always a big part of that story that you're telling after the fact or during that story. So just looking for those metrics early on and making sure you have those is a really important component.
Yeah, and I would add that what we've found as we've measured onboarding programs for customers is a person that's more remote or virtual for their onboarding experience. We have tweaked and tailored some of the measurements and some of the questions. So for example, a person that goes to work in an office every day, thinking not just about the onboarding training, but about the onboarding process. So it may be easier for them to be set up with a PC, a workstation, a phone, an email, a network, because they're right there within the infrastructure of the office, right? But when you're talking about a remote employee, we also evaluate the onboarding process, not the program, and those questions may be quite different in their answer than a person that is working in the office. So we're very particular when we work with clients on measuring onboarding, that it's not just about measuring the onboarding program, the training itself, whether it's delivered remotely or in person or not, because you could have a remote employee go to onboarding training, at the office just for those 2 weeks, and then they're never at the office again. So we also want to make sure that we measure the onboarding process from the perspective of a virtual or remote employee versus the one that's within the infrastructure of the office, and the questions can be different and the responses can be different. So there's a lot to be gained in learning from that. All right, what other questions do we have? Just looking around trying to find other questions. Sorry, it's just really bright up here and I can't see very well. I'll have a lovely headache when this is over. Other questions for the panel? All right. Oh, we got one. Okay, so here we go. I think we do.
Yeah.
I saw like a shadow pop up there.
What does your next 12 months look like in this space?
Great question. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, that's what I lose sleep about a little bit. But here's where we want to be with regard to mobile. Again, I'm not talking about courses now. We don't even really use the word courses like we used to internally. It's about performance support. As I mentioned earlier, it's about delivering resources on this device in the moment of need in context. So our goal is by the end of next year, 2015, is to have all of our content chunked down, tagged, and have a system in place that we can deliver it to this device as needed and on demand. So it's more about curation for us in the next 18 months. That's going to be the word that's buzzing around Coldwell Banker University, is curation, moment of need in context on mobile, and having the back-end systems in place and our content tagged appropriately and chunked down so we can get it in the right size chunks that are digestible and depending on what context and what moment of need they're in.
So for us, it's about the business impact and the learning experience that we're trying to create. So, similarly as well, we're looking at how we can allow for people to access the content the way they need to, right? Wherever they are and when they need to access it, right? But how we're starting the whole thing is from the approach that we need to align to the business priorities. We need to align to the business parameters that we're trying to impact. What are the key performance indicators that we need to move? From there, we understand what are the performance gaps that are limiting the capability for us to move those KPIs. And then what are the learning solutions that need to be made available to support them? Then we make those available, right? And it could be in a variety of formats, and it could be, some of them on the device. It could be some of them instructor-led in person. It could be some of them, through the social collaboration networks. It could be a number of different things. It's the environment. How do we make that available? But ultimately, how do we measure that, right? So everything that we're doing within the organization is now part of a learning plan that is built organizationally for each one of the big businesses that we support. There's a learning measurement map that forms part of this learning plan, and then the solutions are built in with respect to what the business key priorities are, and then we constantly report on them. That's the end-to-end, essentially what we're doing.
And the other piece that we're gearing up for over the next 18 months is building out our instructor skill set to be different. And in my view, the instructor of the future is not going to always be in the classroom. In fact, our instructors right now are building out new skill sets to be more moderators, facilitators in a non-synchronous environment. Like, for instance, some of the My CBU app that's rolling out and will roll out full scale So building up that bench strength with our existing instructor staff is super important right now. To start doing it now, we are.
I don't know if this is 12 months or 18 months, but certainly some initiatives in a couple of different ways. On the reporting side of the data, we had a good discussion at lunch, Dave and I, around the scores that are coming out of these other areas outside of formal learning, and just understanding the context in which they occur. So Dave was sharing that some of his MPS scores in the social learning world were off when he looked at them in isolation. So even though when he looked at it overall, not to steal your thunder here, even though when he looked at it overall, he was seeing that individuals had a better experience and there was more impact when social learning was combined with formal learning. When he evaluated it separately and just said, hey, what did you think of this social learning, the scores were actually sort of lower, like they were less likely to recommend. So just providing benchmarks so that there's some context around that. Maybe that is just the way people evaluate that type of learning and exposing those. In terms of data collection, just continuing to make it easier to collect data in a mobile and a social environment. So certainly adding evaluation capabilities to the MTM mobile app is a big sort of first step in that area. But I think also allowing a more social feedback mechanism for evaluation. I think yesterday we heard death by surveys. I like to call it survey fatigue. But people have such an experience with surveys, sort of a negative experience, yet the web today is all about feedback and giving feedback and getting feedback, and nobody complains about that, right? Because it's more conversational, it's more two-way, it's more individual-led. You're not waiting for an email telling you you've got 7 days to complete something. It's something that you're doing yourself. So I think really extending the capabilities in that manner is sort of a critical task for us and a challenge that we really need to overcome. And I think along the lines of that, also allowing individuals to give feedback on more on-the-job learning, so learning that's occurring outside of systems at all. So the LMS is certainly not tracking half of this stuff, but those special projects, the mentoring that occurs, all of those things, having a facility to very easily track that experience and then on the back end report on the effectiveness.
So it sounds like from our panelists, the next 12 months are going to be quite busy. We're talking about tagging content. We're talking about aligning business priorities to what the business needs and what learning can deliver, but making sure that in that thought process, you're thinking about social and mobile concepts to accomplish that. We're talking about building out instructor skills from being less of an instructor to more of a moderator in the future. We're talking about adding more benchmark capabilities around social and mobile measurement that we might be doing, having a more conversational and individual-led element to collecting data on the job. So very busy next 12 months from what I can gather. All right, other questions? Yeah.
Dave, you mentioned the difference in the instructor's skill set for social. Is there a new type of criteria that you're thinking of when you think about instructor evals for them? And Jeb and Claudia, if you can maybe speak to what you see the future of evaluation being in the social span, for at least for instructors.
Well, I mean, speaking very tactically, finding resources that may exist outside our organization and putting them into my CBU to facilitate these discussions, tying in what's happening in the classroom with what's happening in the MyCBU mobile app. So those skill sets they're building out now. So they're in courses, they're in social learning, so building out those skill sets, social learning skill sets, moderation, curation. So that's kind of where their focus is right now.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I think we need to reevaluate sort of what we are looking for in attributes as we ask instructors to be something new, whether it's performance consultants or things like that. So, requirements gathering maybe becomes a skill set that we really want to evaluate them on. I think there's also that, Fred had that cartoon of the big dog talking down to the little dogs. I think social, right, is all about peer learning, and you're both learning and you're teaching at the same time. So I do think there are some aspects of that that we need to consider within the questions we ask and also how we ask those questions. And so I think that's part of this journey that we're taking here. But it should be very interesting.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, so we're thinking about, how do we, I mean, in our case, right, some of the programs that we have are how do you install a two-way radio, networking system, right? So there are some pieces of that maybe we can take to social, but there's some hands-on stuff that you still have to go through in person, right? So what we're trying to figure out is how do we, with respect to our instructor cadre and pool of resources, how do we get them to a point where they can facilitate some level of interaction, social interaction before the actual event or classroom, in the evenings, after, right? So, and then we're trying to figure out that environment. What does that look like? How do we enable it? And then ultimately, how do we, as you were saying as well, how do we measure that, right? And the good thing, I think, that we're seeing so far is that there's a natural tendency from our instructors to want to do this. They're the first ones that whether years ago, before we had a social network in place, when we already had email, they were the first ones that were already communicating back and forth with their students, right? On, hey, what's happening with it? Can you tell me a little bit more about this box? Or can you, right? So there's a natural inclination in this direction, right? So for us, it's a matter of enabling that in a more structured manner so they have the capability to, fly within it. And then how we measure it, and it's along the lines exactly of what you were saying, the questions, how do we monitor that a little bit as well? Those are some of the things that we're starting to think about. I think at some point maybe somebody may have asked, or we may have talked about how this whole thing starts also with the design process for the programs, right? And the learning assets, the learning solutions, right? So before we actually go down the path of developing anything, we think about, is there a place for social collaboration or social interaction to enable the right knowledge to be gained, right? So it's part of the initial analysis design stages, right, that we're following before we actually develop something.
That's great. So essentially what the panelist is saying is, it's a switch of skill set from more of a traditional classic, you're going to be evaluated on your presentation skills, your delivery skills, and it's shifting more to how about facilitation skills and having facilitation around interaction with the group. Dave talked about a curator of content, a person who provides resources or gets access to resources. Jeb talked about making sure that we can constantly go back and reevaluate those skill sets of the instructors, not only the instructor themselves, but Claudia mentioned also the environment in which they're doing that now needs to be thought about from a measurement and evaluation perspective. So it's a shift that we think is going to happen. But I tend to agree with Claudia that most people who have a knack for teaching others, whether it's traditional instructors, I'm an adjunct professor at a couple universities, and this stuff has been embraced by folks like that. It's just natural with what they do. So I think that it's something that they'll continue to embrace quite well and adapt in their roles.
And the one thing I'll mention is I was worried about that as well as my instructor staff is changing roles. And so we did adapt Net Promoter Score about 10 months ago. My viewpoint was that no matter how that may evolve or not, which I think it's going to evolve some way, but I could be wrong, that I feel like Net Promoter Score can be the common benchmark for our staff, whether it evolves in the way I think it will or doesn't. So we are on board that way with Net Promoter Scores, not knowing exactly where we'll be in 12 months. We're going to use that as the benchmark, and our instructors will have an NPS threshold in their formal plans for 2013 and 14.
Great, thank you, Dave. Other questions out there to the audience for the panel? Yes, ma'am, we have a question over here. Okay. And then we'll take your question back there. So 2 more questions, go right ahead.
I have a question for Jeb. You mentioned there's an app that you use for the managers and the associates to talk before and after training. Can you elaborate on how that works?
Yeah, and it's actually not an app native to the iPhone or smartphone device. It's a module within MTM that is built with responsive design so it can work on any sort of device, whether it be a smartphone, whether it be a laptop, etc. But the module is called Performance Improvement. And really we built it because what we've seen from the data, primarily around formal learning though, is that after a period of time, you know, you're working on your instructors, your courseware, your curriculum, you're improving all of those. The biggest barrier to really improving your impact becomes those things that your manager does, either before training to sort of prepare you for what you're going to do, or post-training to support you in actually implementing those skills you've learned. So the performance improvement module really allows the employee and their manager to set goals together around the learning, and then the system actually puts out reminders to check in on those goals and stimulate the conversation between a manager and employee around those goals. The employee gets to update their progress, ask for assistance, those types of things. The manager gets to support it. And from a back-end perspective, the reporting allows you to track that at the individual level, at the manager level, at the outcomes level. So from an L&D perspective, it sort of extends your span of control. It's not just that event anymore, but you can sort of have some insight into what's being done before training and what's being done after training to really ensure that the impact comes. So I can talk after.
Yeah, and I would say to Jeb's point, what it's doing, you know, in addition is it's real-time a look at behavior change and alignment to business results, both at the individual and the organizational level. And as a quick example, we had a consumer packaged goods firm, speaking of naturally occurring control groups, where two sales teams attended the same change management program around a major change in their the way that they price their products to their end customers. And one regional VP said, I don't need to use the tool, we'll figure it out ourselves. The other VP said, no, this is really important. My teams need to, every week, talk to certain customers every week so that by the time they renew, there's no problems with customer sat or renewal rates. The group that talked to the customers and used the performance improvement tool that Jeb mentioned, they accomplished about 67% of the goal that they had set out to about 6 months later. The group that did not use it at all and just kind of, you know, did management by walking around and seeing what they could do normally only accomplished about 30% of their goal, but they took the same program and nothing else was different. So there is a difference between having something, and it was social and mobile because, again, it had that dialogue. People could do it on a mobile device, a laptop, a tablet, but it really focused the manager and the employee and the program managers in learning and talent on where are we having our problems, where are we seeing successes, both quantitatively and qualitatively, because you're providing both into the mechanism. So it was really good to see that. All right, another question over here.
I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit about the kind of push and pull. So we have a concern from our learners that not everybody is embracing social yet, and not everybody is embracing technology. They love being in person. So it sounds like these are optional. Can you clarify if that's true? And if it's not, how does that work?
So I could maybe start by sharing what's happening within MSI. So we saw that as a challenge. Maybe to some degree we still see it as a challenge. What I'll say is that from a social perspective, we have, within the company, we have a very diverse demographic, right? So we have, you know, entrants into the workplace, right, that, you know, are within a certain, you know, group. And then we have some other groups within the company. And depending on the groups, and depending on the background, depending on a number of different things, right? You know, some people are more inclined to want to use social than others are. So that was the reality. In principle, we've made it optional. However, we're also doing it in a way that to access certain information, you have to go on the collaboration tool to see it. So while it is optional, you're in practice somewhat being left out if you don't go there, right? But you have the option to go there, right? So you should want to go there, right? So as an example, you know, things like, you know, organizational announcements, right? We're starting to move them in that direction. Because it also, we've noticed that it allows them for a conversation, right? So questions around it, right? So then, so what does that mean? So this group that just moved over here, and big news releases, right? So we're also putting them on the collaboration platform, and it allows for a very interesting dialogue, right? Because then all of a sudden you're hearing from somebody in a different part of the world saying, boy, I didn't know that was happening. That's great. By the way, let me tell you what we just did over here. And now the knowledge is just, you're multiplying it, and it's naturally occurring, right? So it is optional, but in some ways, we're making it happen, right? So we do have a top-down approach in many ways, right? Where, the executives are on board, right? Everybody's using it. We're helping people through white gloves training. How do you use it as an executive, right? How often, what should you think about? How can you promote it within your teams, right? So that happened, that continues to happen for reinforcement purposes. And then, like I said, some things we're not making available outside of that, right? Which is a great encouragement to generate pull one way or another. Mobile, I think, again, it's just a reality. I mean, it's in many ways, it's what we're going through. It's not optional or not. It's just, you're going to be in the field in many cases, and you're going to need to have access to the information, right? So it's just becoming more inherent from that perspective. At least my point of view.
So for us, everything's optional. Our franchise environment, we can't dictate other than basic level system tool training to our franchisees. So in 2012, we were tasked with increasing our overall engagement with our network, and we built our social learning portals in response to that challenge. It was to have a greater percentage of our sales associate engage with Coldwell Banker University. So to answer your question, for us, it was a 30% improvement. Our world was X number of sales associates, launched social learning portals, and we were X plus 30%. And we're still seeing a lot of traction in terms of each and every year we're getting multiple single-digit percentage point increases of our world. So in a franchise environment, that's huge. How much of your network can you engage in the university in professional development? So hopefully that gives you some sense of what you can do potentially.
Well, we're almost out of time, so just to summarize then, I think what we've heard here is that to answer your question, it seems to be like it's optional, but the goal is to create a sense of engagement within the social framework, and if you have to drag people to do it, you should. So that's good. So first of all, I'd like to thank our panelists. They did a wonderful job, and so thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Good job.